So we're back right now for the final part 3 of Owning Esports with Steve Arhancet. Got it this time?
You got it.
Got it this time. Okay. So we're going to talk just about everything else that's happening in the esports space. Obviously, talked about CS:GO and League. So let's just start off with a random topic. Overwatch obviously is one of the big conversations that's happening in the space, and sort of seeing. Obviously, I think a 300,000 tournament just got announced by Turner for E-League guys. So
Face It too.
Yeah, Face It I think is doing something. So something in Atlanta as well, or the Atlantic Showdown is happening at Gamescom. That's what it is. So obviously, lots going on with Overwatch. What is sort of the Team Liquid take on Overwatch as an esport, and where you guys think that's headed?
Yeah. Well, my personal stance on Overwatch, or just any esport in general, is that it's has to have a large community base and group of users. So that's one. Overwatch has that. And two, it needs to be a spectator sport. You have to be able to enjoy watching it as much as you do playing it.
Right.
And that, for me, is where it's still a little undecided in terms of the enjoyable aspect of the spectator experience. With that being said, the Team Liquid stance is that we're going all in on Overwatch. Like, it's a really fun game. It's got a massive community, and there's going to be some tournaments. One was just announced, like you mentioned. So we're going to start putting together the best team that we can, and we're going to provide resources and housing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, do you see like an Overwatch team house happening? And
Oh,
all that?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So our facility in Santa Monica, we can kind of easily add extra square footage as we need to, so we could bring in the team, and maybe we even do a challenger team as well, just so we can identify up and coming talent. So maybe we run 2 teams.
Is this sort of happening in a vacuum, or I mean, I've heard that Blizzard is reaching out and being kind of proactive about talking to people about how they really want this to be an esport. I mean, is that spurring any of the motivations or interests that you have in the space?
I think Blizzard getting behind Overwatch as an esport is going to be important, and how much they invest into the game. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what Blizzard's plans are, but based on some of the things that I see now that I didn't used to see before, like you launch the Battle.net client, and the first thing that you see might be a Team Liquid player featured stream, and you didn't used to see stuff like that in the Blizzard client, and featured tournaments and invitationals. They are investing marketing resources behind the esports ecosystem. It will be interesting to find out if they do more than just the marketing.
Sure. Do you think that Overwatch will sort of become this premier thing? I mean, you expressed a little skepticism on the spectator viability of it, but do you think that will sort of rise up as the Blizzard premier esport, or do you think, because right now it feels to me that they have a variety of different esports, StarCraft, Hearthstone, Heroes, etc., and when you add these all together and the viewership there and that whole ecosystem, they're up there with like the Valve and the Riot for CS:GO and League. Do you see any of that coalescing around like a single one of those titles?
I think that there's a lot of potential in Overwatch having a really big presence in esports. I think, to the point I mentioned earlier, they're going to have to do some modifications to either the gameplay or the spectator experience in order for it to really launch itself. I feel like it's a little bit too dynamic and too difficult to watch, and maybe not as balanced as it needs to be. But that's just my personal opinion, and maybe I need to put some more hours in the game to really determine how balanced it is. But I think those things can be easily done. I think they're first getting a really good game into the marketplace and having a lot of people adopt usership or use the game.
Yeah.
And then, if they need to introduce something where you lock in certain champions and there's a ban pick phase, that could just be some patch.
Right.
So easily handled.
So as we mentioned, one of the Overwatch events that's happening is a televised esports event with Turner. We started to see more and more esports on television. Admittedly, our competitor ESPN, it pit Street Fighter on television recently with Evo. What do you think about esports on TV? Because is there some conversation about whether or not TV is the space for it, or if it's always going to be on Twitch or wherever?
Yeah, I mean, my thought is that if you are trying to have current users that are watching on the digital platform convert to television, it's just not going to happen. If you are appealing to the same demographic, the millennial that's on the couch instead of on the computer to enjoy the content, there may be some adoption. But if you're going to try to get somebody that doesn't consume any esports content to start to enjoy via television, I don't think that that's going to work. Overall, I think network television is just, it's dying. Like, I don't think it's doing well. If you look at the ratings for most shows, so these networks, they're scrambling. It's like, wait, no one's watching on network television anymore. Nobody has a cable subscription with 250 channels. People are going more to the HBO, Hulu model, consume the content that I watch. I'll pay $9 a month for whatever, or I'll watch on Twitch or YouTube Live or wherever it's at. And so they're trying to figure out how to take an existing infrastructure that is pivoted to network television and then try to marry the two. I hope that it's successful so that advertisers and sponsors that are typically used to spending money on network television and advertising on those networks gets an idea of what it's like to invest in the digital space. It's kind of a good transitory kind of relationship for them, transition. So I hope it's successful, but I don't think the viewership will be anything close to what it is on the digital front.
Sure. Maybe all these sort of large companies, like you said, transitioning over from TV to streaming on Twitch and other digital platforms. That's sort of their step into that area.
Right, exactly. So as you might see an ad on television. Like, what's the engagement for that? You're sitting on your couch, you see the ad. It's just awareness and reach. If you're in front of a computer, you can click. It's just such a better user experience, and their longer view times. It just goes without saying, but unfortunately, most advertisers just don't understand the space, so it's getting the education out there.
We're about to have a giant event happen on the digital streaming front, which is TI, coming up in just a couple weeks. I understand Team Liquid. I don't really follow Dota too much myself, but I understand Team Liquid has a pretty solid team set up for that event. Any thoughts on sort of TI and your team's status ahead of that?
Yeah, I think TI is such an awesome event. It's the pinnacle, right? It's the one big event that everybody's been competing at all these majors to go and showcase the final talent. That narrative is just really clean. It's great, and in the past, I think two or three majors, we've placed second. So now is our opportunity to really showcase and be the best team. It's going to be an awesome match. It's been great working with our Dota team, and we've had such incredible success. So I can't wait. I'm going to be there the full week in Seattle. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Do you think that team has a chance at taking it all?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, if you've watched any of those games, it's apparent that it's going to be who shows up, during those games.
Yeah. I think today, as we speak, they are just about to surpass the previous prize pool set from the previous TI. Yeah. So it's getting. I think it's within 100K, and as that number, it moves so quickly that I think we'll probably see it surpass very soon. What do you
very
think?
Cool to hear.
Yeah. What do you think of that model, though? Because it does seem like there are a lot of people that sort of say, like, I don't know, how much is too much for a giant prize pool? Do you think that should go forever and it should scale, or what do you think of that ever increasing prize pool every year for TI?
I think large prize pools are great. I think it's a huge incentive for players to dedicate an entire year of their time, honing their craft in a particular game. I think they continue to increase. I like the compendium idea of in-game digital items, and I think it's great that Valve is allowing that marketplace to exist in their game to promote the health of the ecosystem. I may disagree about it being so top-heavy to prize money, right, and not so much on the cultivation and the ecosystem for developing talent, but with that being said, I think they're doing. I think the large prize pools are awesome. They're great.
Sure. That's a bit of a jarring transition, but as we kind of talk about everything else that's happening in esports, you referenced earlier in our episode that there has been a lot of investment coming into the space, lots of different companies coming into the space this year. What do you think of that whole thing? Do you think that all these companies will stick around? Do you think it's ever growing, or do you think that we'll see a lot of, a lot of people talk about dumb money coming into the space, just sort of money being thrown at different projects that's never going to amount. What is your take on sort of the path that the industry is seeing this year?
Mm-hmm. I think that the esports ecosystem is on a massive uptrend. I think that there's a ton of revenue to be unlocked into the space. I think it is primarily with the broadcasting rights and the media rights associated with the content that's being published. Two, I think it's how that inventory is being sold and filled. So when you're watching a Twitch stream or a YouTube live stream and an ad appears, there are salespeople that are selling the placement of those ads, and they're worth a certain amount. And as advertisers find out and trust the data associated with that more, then the value of those CPMs go up. And when those values of CPMs go up, that means that there's more revenue to whatever leagues or streams are broadcasting that content. So I think that the current valuation of the CPMs is way lower than what the engagement value is associated with those ads. And I think that hasn't even touched into the creative area where, we could have Piglet streaming and doing something really cool on stream to drive traffic to a certain website. It can't even be measured, and
right.
And people aren't even understanding what they're buying. So if you're talking about the real value associated with how esports content is being delivered, there's absolutely value there, and it's not being recognized. So that means that there is a huge opportunity to educate the traditional advertisers and marketers to how this works. So I think on that front, on the media front and the advertising front, there's big opportunities. I think also on the sponsorship side, there's some really big stuff. I mean, some of the case studies associated with the partners that we have, like Alienware and Quest Nutrition and HTC, some of the value in driving subscriptions to their YouTube channel or increasing their social media presence or crashing landing pages and increasing website traffic. I mean, it's just, I know these things, the value that I've heard that they would charge in the non-esports marketplace, it's just absurd. So if you're going to ask me, yes, what do I think of the esports and these investments? I think it's such a good investment. With that being said, I think that there's a handful of these investors that may be getting into the space. They don't know what the heck they're doing. For example, unfortunately, you saw the stuff with Ember happen. They really tried to make it work and then just fizzled into nothing. And unfortunately, a lot of the players took a big hit with that. This wasn't good for the ecosystem. So just like any business, there's no guarantee just because you invest in something that's growing that you're going to succeed. You've got to have really good management, and you got to be authentic. You got to know what's going to work and not work.
I know that you lead a lot of the discussions for sales of sponsorships for Team Liquid, and that obviously you've probably met with a lot of companies, both endemic and non-endemic, to the space about bringing in sponsorship to Team Liquid. Do you feel like the kind of conversations that you have changed this year compared to maybe the past couple years? Is it easier to walk into a meeting room and have them already at least have an understanding of what esports is and not have to educate them on it? Or how have those conversations changed over the past year or so?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a buzzword. People are like, oh, what's esports? And they're trying to figure out how to budget for it. They're trying to figure out how to, I quote a certain number for a sponsorship or a certain activation, and they're like, okay, well, how do we measure that?
Yeah.
And so that's like the next conversation is analytics and measuring and the jargon and language that's being used to track all this stuff. It's just getting them used to that. So that's where it's at right now. But I'm absolutely, there's more awareness for the industry. They're just trying to figure out how to create the activations within the space.
Yeah. you one of the few people who have actually created a meme for a company.
Oh, yeah,
Looks like
that's
my
right.
HCC phone is ringing.
Yes.
How much do you normally ask from a sponsor to create a meme specifically for their product? Is that in
We
the
have
millions,
in the contract,
or,
it's
yeah.
like, Steve will create meme.
Yeah, okay. And that's a line item where
X dollars.
that's X dollars. Okay. And you bring that in, that's part of your deck when you're presenting to a sponsor. It's like, also we can create memes around your product, and that'll be X amount.
I wish I was had as much foresight to plan that,
Yeah.
but no, that was a little bit more serendipitous.
Okay. It's just a bonus for HCC.
It was,
in that instance.
yeah.
Very good. Well, hey, at the end of all my interviews with not just your players but others, I ask if there's anything that they would like to say to any of the esports fans out there, or any of the Team Liquid fans here, sort of at the end of this episode of Owning Esports. Is there anything that you would like to say to any of the Team Liquid fans out there, or esports folks watching this interview?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first and foremost, I have to thank our partners, our sponsors that have enabled us to be in business and to cultivate these athletes and to compete at the highest level. Team Liquid is having, I think, one of the best years in our 15-year history. We are kicking ass in almost every game that we represent, having top teams and players. So wouldn't be possible without our sponsors and partners. And then obviously our fans. I think this weekend at LCS, we had a guy that he has a curse tattoo on one hand, and then he's got a Team Liquid tattoo on the other hand. It was just cool to see such conviction and dedication to the brand. So huge shout out to all the Team Liquid fans out there.
Steve, thanks so much for coming in and sitting down with me today for our first episode of Owning Esports. Really appreciate it, and great to get insight both on what's happening with your team and what you sort of see happening across the industry. For everyone else, you can check out more coverage of all things esports and more episodes of Owning Esports in the future here at Yahoo Esports.